2, 3, 4.
Okay, great. So Tim and I were just playing the changes of All the Things You Are, and Tim was illustrating a lot of different concepts there. Some of the things that we're going to talk about in today's lesson is the use of how to integrate various techniques in sort of a bebop style fashion. You know, in other words, how to use enclosures and chromatics as well as bebop scales. So turn it over to Tim.
Okay, Scott, thanks. On that song, All the Things You Are, Scott and I were playing together. I played the melody. In the first chorus of improvised solo, I played entirely diatonic. The second chorus, I started introducing some chromatic lines. And then the third chorus, I started introducing more chromatic lines. And there were some rhythmic variations in the second and third choruses that I tried to exploit with the chromatic ideas. There was a question asked about playing bebop. Kind of the way it was framed was kind of versus more like what I would call elemental approaches to improvising. We've talked about triad pairs. We've talked about digital patterns and scales. You know, those are all elements of what we have to use musically. They're musical devices. And I don't really think about these things as like separate things. I put them all together, but it's helpful to separate these ideas and to work on them, to isolate them, and to get proficiency. But the main challenge with bebop, especially to those that aren't familiar with the music, and that is the chromaticism involved with it. And for now, let's just start out with a definition of chromaticism being anything that's non-diatonic, whether it's a chord or a scale. So that'll be our working definition for chromaticism as far as that goes. You can do a lot with scales. You can do a lot with digital patterns and arpeggios and triads, everything we've discussed and things that we haven't discussed yet. But the main challenge of bebop is that chromaticism. And there's several things, as I look at the big picture, that I like to talk about before I give any kind of concrete examples. The first thing that I would recommend anybody that's really serious about pursuing this is getting the Charlie Parker Omni book, and start going through and learning those melodies. If you have what that book is it's a collection of Charlie Parker melodies and solos, and it's put out by Jamie Aebersold Jazz, and they're great. They come in concert key. They're in B flat. They're in E flat. And Charlie Parker was the most important innovator as far as bebop music. There's some others: Dizzy Gillespie, Dexter Gordon, Bud Powell, Miles Davis. But you want to start with Charlie Parker, and I would start to learn some of his melodies. And there are about 4 or 5 ones that are considered the most difficult. Melodies like Donna Lee, Moose the Mooch, Anthropology, Confirmation. And I would encourage you not to be shy about jumping into those. Just go ahead and start working on those melodies, because it's going to take you a while to work on them, and then maybe you can also work on some of the simpler melodies. But if any of you have ever heard of the great jazz guitarist Ted Dunbar, he used to, all of his students, he was a New Jersey and New York player, a great player that recently passed. He would assign all of his students several bebop melodies to work on, and that's a good. And he would encourage them to do it like the first thing they did when they woke up, get warmed up, and play through your bebop melodies. So it's very important, and you're going to have to listen to this music to really get acclimated to it. You need to get that sound into your ears. So I would also encourage you to transcribe all those artists as far as that goes. But for a very simple beginning example of chromaticism, I'm just going to let's just take C major, and I'm just going to go up the second string. So I'm just going to do like a C major scale, going up a single string on the second string, going up to the 9th, D. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a leading tone in front of each diatonic scale note. Now, if you know your scale formula, you'll know that 2 of those instances, between 2 of those notes, there's already a half step in the major scale formula between B and C. That's a leading tone. And then E and F, you got a leading tone. But now I'm going to chromaticize this entire scale. So that's ascending. And you can do different rhythmic variations. very important where you place the notes. The bebop style always has a chord and or a scale tone on the downbeats. Most of the time. It's not, nothing's 100% with this music. But the sound that you're hearing, the chromaticism, is the motion of the line. There's a certain rhythmic and melodic and harmonic momentum that's going on with the bebop style. And it goes back to Johann Sebastian Bach and counterpoint and the way that music was composed. So this music is an innovation, but it's not in a vacuum. So another rhythmic variation we could do would be 2/8 notes and a quarter. So there's a leading tone. So you're kind of creating these little tonalities. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Get different ideas as far as that goes. And then you can do this scale exercise on every string so that you get the flexibility. And I'm using the Mick Goodrick / Gene Bertoncini concept as far as the going up and down the neck more horizontally so that you really can visualize all these. And you can think through the harmonic implications of this. You've got a C, would be C major 7 and G7. And then the D to C sharp back up to D would be D minor, and then secondary dominant A7 back to D. E would be E minor and B7. F, C7. So we're thinking of all these leading tones as the third of a dominant 7th chord preceding the root of the note that we're right on. G, G7 and D7, A minor, E7, yep, B minor 7 flat 5, F sharp 7, and then back to C. G7. So that would be your first example to start working on this. And you always remember the question that was asked, the implication was that there's an easy formula, and there isn't. These are all tools that you have to integrate into your playing, and you have to practice improvising. You have to practice many tunes. You have to practice over chord changes. You have to practice over modal changes where there's a static harmony over one harmony. So, but this will get you started, and we'll do a lot. We'll do some other sessions on this, but you can do this chromaticism. Then what you can do with that same major scale is you can start to take the whole and the half steps and do chromatic enclosures there. So for this C to D, I'm going to do an 8th note pattern. And then D to E. And then when we've got our half step, I just usually do like 2 8th notes and a triplet. You can do an diatonic, in this case the F is diatonic, upper neighbor, leading tone, or you can call it a lower neighbor if you want, whatever you want to call it. Or you can reverse it and go. So there you're tonicizing and you're enclosing. It's the same thing. Doing an enclosure with a half step. Now we've got another whole step with F and G. G to A to B. We've got another half step. C to D. Back home. Then you can start combining some of these. This one lays out really nicely rhythmically for a major third. And then for a minor third, I'll do a triplet, D to F, E to G, back to eighth notes or sixteenths. G, back to triplets for A minor, B minor 7 flat 5, so then you can start to see, let's just do like a 1 total, just totally diatonic progression, like C A minor 7 to D minor. Yeah, but we'll measure each.
Okay.
Let's do that. 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Variations with that, and I can move each one of those little, you can think of that tonality as enclosing major and minor thirds in the major scale. Okay, now I know we're not to Charlie Parker yet, but these are all building blocks. So you can think of that major scale, you got major thirds, minor thirds, and you can move those all around, and you've got to think of the rhythmic considerations as far as eighth notes and triplets, or you can think either just duple or triple as far as laying out the chord tones. So you can move those around, and then you can also do arpeggios. So now I'm going to do the half step with that, 2 eighth notes and a quarter. You can move those around and experiment with those, and you can do the extensions. So we'll do C major up all the way up. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll just stay on C major. 1, 2, 3, 4. Seventh, ninth, 11, 13, back up to the root. So then you've got the full range, and you can refer back to where we talk about the harmonized chord scale and the extended arpeggios. We've got lessons on those too, so we won't spend any time talking about that today. So you do each tonality as far as that goes with the major scale and moving those around. Then you can take all your intervals and you can do, let's say, so now I'm going to move to 2 strings. So you could do like as far as left hand fingerings, by the way, this is pretty simple. It's just 2 and 1 right now at this point. Just go. A lot of gypsy guitarists will use this lick. Or if you've ever heard the Villalobos prelude. Whoops. I remember when I was in grad school, I did that on one of our studio recitals, and this one of the eccentric guys that was in the room kind of chuckled at when that lick happened and went, Charlie Parker. So again, you want to listen to as much music good. You want to listen to as much good music as possible, and you'll see the common threads that are going on. So you'll take these. I'm going to take these. I'm going to take that set of thirds. And I'm going to do then you can start doing different intervals. So this is all, again, based on C major. So let's say I wanted to go. So I'm doing fourths. About that as far as really listening to the intervals, and what you're doing is you're enclosing different intervals, so that interval itself is going to be within that line, but then you're chromatically setting up the entire line. So you're doing chord tones, but then you're also doing intervallic things as well. And then there's one more enclosure I'd like to talk about. And you hear this all the time. So I'm just going to take a C major 7 arpeggio. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play 2 diatonic notes and 1 chromatic note within these enclosures. But it's going to change from 2 different formulas. So I've got, I'm going to start on the 9th. So I'm going 1 and 2 and I'm starting on the and most common, you can move this around anywhere rhythmically, but most commonly you hear this line, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So you're on the and 4 and 1, or and 4 and 2, and 4 and 3. I'm sorry, and 2 and 3, and 3 and 4. So you're landing on that chord tone. So this is a minor third enclosure. So I'm doing D, D flat, B, C. Okay, so 9th, flat 9, 7th, root. Now this enclosure here, I'm starting on the F, and then I'm going down. F's diatonic, D's diatonic, up to E, D sharp, E. Okay, the reason I'm doing that is because we've got these two diatonic notes, this half step. G, I'm doing A flat, F sharp, G, da 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 da, ba da da da, ba da da da, da da da, ba da da da, up to B, da da da. That set up also with triads where so let's try the same progression. 1, 2, 3. Variations, but I was using all of those ideas that I've introduced today. And so you have to, again, you have to practice improvising, you have to do the soloing and practice all these tonalities and work on different tunes. And those are all what we just did today, is all just in one key. And then you've got to do your homework to where you can be fast and spontaneous with all the different chord types. And then as far as what we're going to introduce in the next sessions, we're going to talk about, so work on some bebop melodies. Go get that Omni book and get some Charlie Parker recordings. We're gonna work on some bebop melodies, and we're going to analyze the melodies. We're going to analyze the melodies in relation to the chord changes and also to the scales. So we're going to take like part of a melody and talk about the vertical relation between the melody and the chords. And then we're going to take that same melody and we're going to talk about the relation of all those chromatic notes within that given tonality and different given scale at that point. And so you can do a harmonic analysis and a melodic analysis. And another thing to be aware of is that these bebop artists, when we played All the Things You Are, later on, after that tune, Jimmy Heath wrote a song called Prince Albert. If you've heard the term contrafact before, they write a bebop melody over those chord changes. Now they did it for copyright reasons, so they could put songs on the records have their own compositions and not have to pay royalties. But they were improvising over all these standards as well as the bebop tunes that they wrote. But that's another thing to be aware of. That's great. That's a great thing about the bebop tradition and the Omni book, is that there are several blues, there are several rhythm changes, and standard chord progressions that this vocabulary was written over. Coco is the chord changes to Cherokee. You've got ornithology is How High the Moon. Bebop, I don't think Groovin' High is not in the Omni book, but that's a Dizzy Gillespie composition. Groovin' High is Whispering. And then other standards as well. Several rhythm changes, several blues. So that's the assignment for now. Go get that Omni book and work on those chromatic enclosures. Thank you very much.